and folks who are not staff or with the consulting team on the screen, because what I tell you is I think that the good governance and fiscal sustainability priority is incredibly important and like one of the most difficult things for folks to wrap their heads around. And so I think maybe that's why we're seeing not as many people, I think first of all, who had volunteered to be on this, and maybe then once they volunteered and kind of took a look at some of the information that then maybe they're not able to join us. So Steve, what Steve and I are talking about is if we should go ahead with the process as outlined, or if we should have kind of a more of an open discussion. We do see, again, Hannah and Samuel have both been with us before, but let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think Steve actually, given that staff and Rochelle and Leah would both be kind of part of those breakout groups, we could still do the process if you'd like, because I think we'd have 8 folks to put into breakout rooms when we get to that point, but your call.
Yeah, we basically have 4, 5 from outside of the building. Everybody else is either internal or
okay, I'll follow your lead. So Steve, let's just go.
Let's I think Stuart here is trying to get connected on audio, and as soon as we see that he's connected, we'll kind of rock and roll and maybe feel this out a little bit.
Okay, that sounds great.
So Hannah and Samuel, specifically, what we're talking about here is, of course, you both have been through the full process, and you know the process is fairly lengthy. Talking about calling an audible here and making today a little bit more of a Q&A. We can talk a little more some specifics as far as financial forecasting and going that route. So I really kind of probably rely on the two of you to throw in your opinion here as to whether or not you want to go through the full process again, or we do an abbreviated one.
I would be fine with the abbreviated.
Okay. Samuel, you good with that?
I am good with that as well.
Okay.
So Steve, maybe, so that sounds right. So maybe what we could do is we could still go ahead and I could take them through the process through in the PowerPoint so everybody sees that. Maybe Adam could also do the environmental scan.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of lay out anything that you'd like to, and then maybe we can follow up with a few questions that maybe, I mean, I can come up with some questions that are similar to what we'd be asking in the full process, but just not the full process, and then certainly be open for Q&A. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
I think that'd be a good way to do it.
Okay, great. All right, so everybody, you've just seen an adaptation in action. So let's go ahead and we'll just kind of get started here a little bit. Steve, do you want to do any kind of introductions, or shall we just go ahead and go forward here?
Yeah, just real quick.
Okay. Yeah.
Samuel and Hannah, thanks again for doing this again. Pastor Clark and Mr. Ledbetter, Dr. Overstreet, thank you for coming. Greatly appreciate your participation here. This is the 5th of the sessions we've done, and this is going to be a little smaller group than what we've been having, but we're here to listen. We're here to hear what you have to say, and so and we're here to answer questions. So we are gonna modify this one a little bit and shorten it up, but I greatly appreciate your time, and we'll just kind of walk through this.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and do introductions, just for the sake of folks who are just joining us for the first time. And again, this is really so you can share kind of your perspective in terms of, so your name, kind of your affiliation, as well as then kind of hopes that you might have for maybe specifically as we look at this particular category, but also kind of broader term, your hopes for the community. And so, oops, I think Dr. Overstreet maybe still can't hear us. Not sure what to do about that. I'll just start really quickly. I'm Patty Genterp with KU's Public Management Center and have been pleased to work with the city team and be on the city team as we work through these, identifying the priorities and what you want to see in your community. And I'm here with my colleague Bree, who is helping us with tech and facilitation, et cetera. So with that, I guess I'll just go. Kalea, you want to introduce yourself? Long tenured citizen that you are.
Yeah, my name's Kalea Powley. I'm the grants administrator for the city of Topeka. I have been in Topeka for like coming on 3 weeks now, 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm still trying to figure out the area. And I'm just here to listen.
Adam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Vaughn. I work in the budget office for the city. It's been a fun process going through these 5 meetings. We've gotten a lot of good feedback about kind of where the priorities of the community are. And I'm really excited to continue on this process and to work towards creating a budget that reflects the priorities that the community has for the city of Topeka.
Great, thanks, Adam. Rochelle.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Matthews. I'm the Deputy Director of Finance, and I manage a lot of the accounting functions within the city. This is my first time, so I'm just excited to sit and listen and help wherever possible.
Great, thank you. Gretchen.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Speicher. I'm the Director of Communications for the city, and I have had the privilege of sitting through the last 5 of these sessions, and so I'm excited to listen in tonight and learn from you all and see what great ideas you have.
Great, thanks, Gretchen. Pastor Clark.
Marcus Clark, service pastor of the Love Fellowship Church in East Topeka, and also want to be an advocate for East Topeka.
Thank you. Amanda.
Hi, Amanda Stanley. I'm city attorney for Topeka. This is my first budget session sitting through, so I'm excited to listen to you guys and learn what this is all about.
Great. Dr. Overstreet. I don't know if she can. Okay. Samuel.
Hello, I'm Samuel Paulum. I'm a Washburn University student, taking Professor Duffy's public budgeting class. So I get to be an observer, and if I feel like I got anything to add, too.
It's actually been great to have the students be part of this process, because I think they absolutely have added to the conversations. And so we're glad that you're back with us, Samuel. Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Schumacher. I am a citizen of Topeka in the 6th City Council District. And like before, I hope to see some action come from this process related to the priorities that have been identified.
Great, thank you. Stuart.
Yes, hi. I apologize. I'm home with 2 sick twin boys today.
Oh, well, welcome to all 3 of you.
Yeah, my wife, she's a veterinarian. She's apparently running late. So anyways, I grew up in Topeka. I'm 38. I've got 4 kids, 2 of them here. So I'm all for Topeka. I went to Washburn University, Topeka High. I only left for about a year when I lived in Kansas City and decided I thought Topeka was equally as good. So I moved back. But yes, I'm looking forward to contributing, and my wife is here to relieve me. So yeah.
We do families, no worries. So my tiles have moved around just a little bit, but Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah Bowling. I'm with the City of Topeka, the Contracts and Procurement Division under Finance. So this is my first budget workshop as well, and I'm excited to see what I can contribute and learn from the process, and also how we can gain from this experience.
Great, thank you. And Josh.
Hi, everybody. I'm Josh. I also work with Adam in the budget office, and usually I'm one of the facilitators, but today, since we're kind of calling an audible, I don't know if we're going to do that today. And then the thing I've liked most about this process is kind of hearing from the citizens on what we need to do to get better as a community to meet our strategic plan.
Great, thank you. We'll ask Dr. Overstreet if she's able to hear us and maybe can tell us what she's.
Yes, I can hear you. You may see that I am on twice. I need to just kind of make sure that that I can hear you on one instrument and then I'll see you on the other one.
That works.
Yes, I'm Glenda Overstreet Vaughn, and I'll say that I've been here in Topeka for about 35 years. Strong community advocate. I am also a Washburn graduate, and I have had an opportunity to work on other committees, serving as the Vice President of Business Affairs for a community college and then working in the healthcare arena. So from that perspective, maybe I might have some input that might be helpful. We'll see.
Absolutely. No, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're here. Well, thank you, everybody. Did I miss anybody, or are we good? Did I get everybody? Well, thank you for taking the time to do that. I just think it's important as we all have these conversations, especially since we're going to be a little bit more familiar maybe than if it was a larger group. It's helpful to know kind of what everybody's perspective is. So thank you so much for doing that. So just let's take just a few minutes to talk about the process that we've been engaged in for the last few weeks. And so as a few of you have mentioned, this is our fifth and final workshop that's focused on a specific topic. And these were the priorities that were identified by the governing body in their 2022 budget. And so tonight we're specifically talking about improving fiscal sustainability and good governance. And so over the course of time, what we're asking residents to come together and focus on really is our objectives. What are specific objectives, goals and objectives within each of those priorities? We really want to make sure that we are paying attention to everything from, and what we'll find is there is a lot of crossover. So we might be talking about neighborhoods, but infrastructure is going to come up, or we might be talking about fiscal sustainability, but utilities are going to come up. And so we're seeing those patterns come through across the 5 workshops. So again, this is the fifth of 5 workshops specifically focused on one category. We will be having a final workshop on March 10th. Please mark your calendars if you haven't already for that workshop. And everybody who has participated in the process to date will be invited. So we could have up to 100 participants. And right now the plan is for that to be still virtual. And that's something that I absolutely know that we can accommodate. In terms of participation, I want to point out that while some staff has said that they are here to facilitate and those kinds of things, staff is really here kind of as a partner with the citizens in these discussions. And so that is different than sometimes other processes where staff is just a resource, but we're really relying on them to add to the conversation as we go through. So this is just a calendar, and you'll see we're on the 21st of February. Not sure how we did that, where we're talking about fiscal sustainability and good governance. And then March 10th, as I've just described, is the final workshop. I think this is helpful to kind of understand in terms of the process and kind of the outcomes. And so this is one of 5 budget priorities by the governing body. So you see that fiscal sustainability and good governance. From there, we're going to be identifying kind of goal categories, so goals. And so within fiscal sustainability, a category might be asset management. And then a specific objective might be to address deferred maintenance in facilities and infrastructure. And so that's really how the report, frankly, will be structured. So with that, I do want to turn it over to Adam Vaughn, who will be providing information. You all will have received this in materials that were sent out prior to the workshop, but just so that we're all kind of on the same foundation in terms of this particular topic.
Great, thanks, Patty. And so before we called the audible, this was a time for me to kind of go over where we're at for each of the priorities and then leave it up for questions. And so I imagine we'll just continue the questions and continue conversation as I complete this. It's also fun because all the other workshops I've had to say, okay, we're going to start with finances, stay with me. But now we're at the finance workshop. So this is a good slide. So the city's total operating budget is about $339 million. And of that, $98 million is part of the city's general fund. Now, this is important because the city's general fund is one of the main revenue sources for many of the city services that Topeka provides. Additionally, by state of Kansas law, the general fund has to be balanced every year. And what this means is that in the budget, expenses and revenues have to equal each other. And so you can see the 22 budget in this table below, that the revenue and expenses match each other exactly. We've done some modeling of expenses and revenues that we expect over the next 5 years. And what we found is that our expenses are outpacing our revenues. And so part of the reason why we're doing these workshops and working on the budget is to prioritize so that we know what kind of decisions that we should be making when addressing this shortfall. Another thing to note too, that we've been talking a lot about ARPA recently, the American Rescue Plan Act. And recently in council, they talked about using some of the money that the city received directly to fund projects that were bonded in our capital improvement plan, in the hopes of being able to keep the general fund expenses lower than what we are expecting, and the goal of then being able to not raise the mill levy. And so that is an additional piece of context that we have now since we've been meeting and talking about the American Rescue Plan Act. So continuing to talk about the revenue sources for the city, this is a chart of all the revenue sources for the total $339 million budget. And so I wanted to specifically talk about property tax as a revenue. And so for each property tax dollar that citizens in Topeka spend, 25% of that dollar goes to the city. And so the city's general fund budget is made up 33% of property tax of their revenues. And so it's something that city staff is aware of and that the governing body is constantly working with, because it's the easiest revenue source for us to be able to set. With the mill levy is set each year, and it can lower or raise the amount of property tax that the city receives. But we obviously this chart helps us to see that there's a lot of other government agencies that also collect property tax. And so it's not always easy to just increase the property tax for the city. In the fall of last year, the city conducted a citizen survey and found that the top reasons that citizens reported about living in Topeka was the cost of living, affordable housing, and quality housing. And so I've shared this slide. Obviously, this is the 5th time. And one of the things that keeps coming up is how this is just one piece of the equation, that although citizens see the value that the cost of living and that there's affordable housing and quality housing, that there have been other studies and things brought out that show that there still is an affordable housing gap, and there's still a need to increase affordable housing in the community. Additionally, the survey gave 5 different priorities that the city should prioritize. Number 1 being maintenance of streets, 2, enforcement of codes and ordinances, 3, effectiveness of communication, 4, overall quality of water and sewer utilities, and 5, overall quality of police services. So each year when the budget is adopted, the city council has also listed goals that they would like to achieve under each category. So last year's goals for this priority from the council are as follows. Continue to evaluate and update fiscal policies as appropriate. And I will make a note that on the city's website, you can find many of the city's fiscal policies, such as the debt policy and the CIP policy, basically what categorizes as a capital improvement and should be included in our capital improvement plan, that we have a policy specifically for that. Continued excellence in reporting and transparency, build a comprehensive plan to address facilities and fleet deferred maintenance, continue to evaluate adequate funding level for utility operations and capital needs, establish and maintain adequate reserves for all funds, and make strategic funding decisions based on 5-year and long-term impacts. And with that, we will stand for questions. Is there any questions about the information that was just shared?
Adam, let's let me pull up the deck that's got the debt levels on that and maybe see if that spurs a couple questions here.
I have also trying to get on. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
You know, what are some of the specifics that contribute to that you have for expenses outpacing the revenue? What are specifics that you have that would lend itself towards the outpacing of revenue?
So labor itself is the primary component.
Yeah, I see.
That's causing the outpace. So you, Dr. Overstreet, you know that we have 7 unions here in the city of Topeka, and the majority of our employees are in a union, and with those contracts, we have levels of increases that have already been agreed to. And so if we look at those levels versus what we expect for property taxes to be, and sales tax growth to be, the labor costs are outpacing revenue.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
it's all in labor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve, while you're looking for that other slide deck, I might ask if folks can share with us maybe when you're considering good governance or fiscal sustainability, really, what are your hopes in those categories for the city of Topeka?
Well, my hope is that there is due diligence when it comes to looking at the comparison between apples and apples. Like, for instance, we're looking at right now the specifics that contribute, and primarily I'm hearing it's labor. Okay, but when I look at the environmental scan, our population is going down. And so when we're negotiating with these unions, are we taking into consideration the due diligence of saying, well, our population is not necessarily growing, when we're making those agreements. We want to make sure that we are communicating effectively with respect to the reality that we have as it relates to population.
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, instead of just a general yes, can I ask how many full-time equivalents do we have? What's the average pay or median pay? How does that compare to communities, of Topeka's size? So, I mean, even within Northeast Kansas, we'd say Lawrence or Kansas City or Wichita, but those aren't necessarily comparable in population. But I mean, I guess.
So we have a budgeted 1,150 FTE. We're running down about 100 to 125 off of that. We are constantly looking at rate comparisons. And so as we go through labor negotiations, That is part of the process. The city is also in the middle of doing a comprehensive rate study when it comes to salaries, and we are specifically looking at several locations in Northeast Kansas.
Yeah, I might add to that as well, is that, you know, that's also just kind of one piece of the picture, right? And so I think when we're specifically talking about outcome-based budgeting, it's like eventually, what are we trying to get to? What kind of community we want to have, right? And then what are the resources that we need to put to that, you know, to build that community? So FTEs and pay is one issue, but there's so many other things, right, that are involved that you really have to consider as well.
I have another question. Do we have like a grant management office as a part of finance or financial department?
So one of the spots on your screen right now, Dr. Overstreet, is Kalea. And Kalea is new with us as a grants administrator.
Okay. So we have one position, or is there a small department?
No, ma'am, we have one position.
Okay. Because that's an area that I see, you know, can be quite beneficial, you know, in helping to at least pay for certain types of programs or certain type of activity. But I don't know how effective or you know, one person can, I mean, I've been involved in that process, and it really takes quite a team to be able to, you know, research and write the grants and follow up and provide monitoring and reporting. So from that perspective, you know, I see that as being can really be beneficial.
Yeah. Now I will tell you that this grants position is separate from a lot of our federal grants. So if you think about HUD and you think about our community development block grants, that's handled through our housing department. And so that's separate. And Rochelle, off the top of my head, that's what, about $14 million?
Okay. All right. Thank you for letting me know that. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. So let me show you a little bit about where we're at on debt, and maybe that plays in to some of Adam's conversation. So on your screen right now, I believe you should see geo debt outstanding. And so you'll see Topeka as compared to Wichita, Kansas City, Kansas, and Lawrence. And so outstanding, you'll see Topeka sitting at about $151 million. This is on general obligation bonds. General obligation bonds are what we use to fund roads, buildings. Wichita obviously is quite a bit larger, KCK, and then Lawrence. On a per capita basis, so looking at population specific, you'll see that Topeka is below that of Wichita and KCK, a little bit ahead of Lawrence. And then this is the 10-year changes of bonds. And so this is something that the city's very proud of right now, the governing body's proud of. So you can see in the last 10 years, our overall debt has dropped 14.5% on general obligation bonds. And when you compare that to Wichita, KCK, and Lawrence, all three of those you've seen growth. Revenue bonds are basically our utilities. So it's our water, our stormwater, and wastewater. Topeka's sitting on about $314 million of debt. You see Wichita, KCK, and Lawrence. On a per capita basis, you can see that Topeka is actually quite a bit higher than Wichita and Lawrence. And you can see the growth that Topeka's had in the last 10 years on revenue bonds. Wichita's seen a drop, KCK's gone up, Lawrence has gone up. And so that gives you an idea where we are on debt. Adam, if you want to maybe go back to your slide that's got the 5-year forecast on it, because your numbers are a little more updated than what I have on mine. So this was the slide that you saw a minute ago that shows expenses outpacing revenue. What's important here when we look at debt, our mill levy, our property tax income is split 3 ways. It's split between general fund, which is what you're seeing on your screen right now. It contributes towards debt service, and then it contributes towards a special liability fund, which basically is if the city gets sued, then we have a fund to protect the taxpayers there. When your debt decreases, that means we don't have to spend as much of the mill levy on debt service, and so we can actually move that into operations. By moving it into operations, that allows us then to freeze the mill levy overall. And so if you have followed the discussions with ARPA the last few weeks, that's been part of the conversation is, can we use ARPA money to pay down, pay cash instead of borrowing money on some of the projects that have already been approved? By doing that, that allows us then to increase the revenue, because you're moving some of that debt service into the general fund, and allows your revenue then to stay at the same pace as expenses.
Right. I've been keeping up with that conversation. And I think that from the community, there also is a push to get more of those ARPA funds put into the community. I think what they ended up agreeing on was, how much was it that they were going to consider going into like community type projects, and how much would be going into the proposed general fund?
So $10 million is going to go into
10 million.
10 million.
Yeah. Right.
The other just under 36 would go towards basically debt avoidance.
So if that were the case, and the 36 went into debt avoidance, that would decrease. But would there be in a future year, given that decrease, would that amount stay pretty consistent, or would it be a possibility of ultimately having enough funds from that to be able to go back into the community?
Based on the projections we've got right now, and again, that's obviously a policy decision that's made by the governing body, but based on our projections right now, I don't think you'll see anything left over to go back into the community. And the reason for that is, for the next 5 years, we're actually looking at about $59 million of borrowing on the geo bond side.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 36 doesn't get all the way there.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Other questions on that?
I just have one thing to add. Mr. Ledbetter might know, working in the banking industry, but when the city sells bonds, not only is there there is a benefit to our infrastructure, but those bonds go out into the market and can be used by local financial institutions. The state of Kansas requires every dollar on deposit with a government entity has to be collateralized, so that if the banking were to suffer a crisis, cities and schools and states would not lose their funds. And so in my past life, to steal a term from Steve, I was an accountant at a bank, and part of my job was to manage collateral. And it was our bank's policy that we would only buy Kansas bonds. And it was interesting to find enough bonds with enough strong financial backing so that we could have enough collateral for our clients. And so those bonds do go out into the state and the communities, and they do benefit people in kind of different ways, if that makes sense.
Other questions?
I just want to again say thank you guys for allowing me to be a part. My question is in the area of messaging. Adam, can you put the revenue expense slide back up just one more time for my question? So guys, my question is this: in the area of wanting to keep to put out positive messaging about our city and all of us looking to grow our city, give persons like myself and others, give us the language to use on how to present data like this to the wider community without panic, without cause or reason to be alarmed. How would we relay this type of data to the wider community and keep calm as they look at these numbers?
Pastor, that's a great question. Let me take a shot at it, and others can jump in here also. I think the message that I want everybody on this call to hear, and other constituents, is we've got this. We recognize the situation. We're trying to be very responsible as we look forward over the next 5 years. And we're trying to be very respectful of the taxes that are levied with the citizens. We're trying to be very respectful with the expenses. And so I guess what I'm trying to say, boss, is that we do have this, and we're trying to make sure that we're taking care of the citizens here, and there is no cause for alarm. Does that help any at all?
No, that's excellent. I think we need to put that on a t-shirt, Steve.
So I hear you, and certainly you're right. If we don't message this right, it could cause some concern, but I'm very excited with the path that the governing body has taken with the ARPA, the money right now, the $36 million being set aside for debt avoidance. I think that puts the city in a very, very good position through 27. And so I'm proud to be part of this team.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Ledbetter, you're a CPA. I know that you've been looking at stuff, and I've been waiting for weeks now to listen. So
you're gonna can.
I probably haven't looked as much as I should have. I'm in the middle of leading a bank exam of an $85 billion federal home loan bank in a different part of the country. So I'm a little busy with that, but
right.
Today's a federal holiday, so I did peruse the packet today in between my commitments. So forgive me though, how much debt, the way you guys are positioning this, you guys are proposing we take out debt. How much debt are we talking about?
So ask the question again.
I guess how much in bonds are you expecting to issue in order to cover the shortfalls and kind of reallocate the debt profile of the city?
Okay, so no debt taken out to coverage of shortfalls. Any debt we have is strictly for capital. And so for capital, what's been approved by the governing body for 2022 through 2026 is $59 million of debt issuance on general obligation bonds. Those are for things such as sidewalks, streets, fire trucks, traffic signals, facilities. And so what's been proposed here or been approved by the governing body is that instead of taking out $59 million worth of bonds, we take out the difference using the 36. So right, 20, just over $23 million.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on the utility side, so the utility side, let me look here real quick, see if I have that real quick. Over the course of the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So this is water, wastewater, stormwater, about $140 million of debt from 22 through 26, if I look at this right. Much of that is actually related towards federal compliance on water quality. So you have an upgrade with our water treatment plant, and you have an upgrade on our wastewater plant in North Topeka, and I believe some upgrades in Oakland also. If that answers your question.
And on the 140 million for the utilities, I think I understand. I'm following along on Dr. Overstreet. She's very informed, so I'm following now her comments a little bit better. With that, I apologize. But can I ask on the 140 million for the utilities, is that being covered by the utility rate hikes that we've seen? I think that you guys, at least that I've seen come through the newspapers, I think, isn't that still expected to have additional rate hikes for the water?
So there's a rate hike that's already been approved for this year and next. So there'll be conversations here coming up shortly as far as moving forward. What's been proposed is at a minimum covering the cost of inflation. And so we're in our forecast model, we've pegged out about 3% as an average cost of inflation. And what's been initially recommended to council is about a 4% utility rate increase. But those conversations are still really haven't even started.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Schumacher, anything from you?
No, not at the moment. Just trying to take that all in.
Sure. Patty, what do you think?
Great opportunity to for people to ask questions. I just didn't know if anybody came with suggestions on what they'd like to see the city do. Not that we would be prioritizing these as we would with a greater group, but just wanted to give people an opportunity to say, you know, if they came like with something specific on their mind, I just want to give them that opportunity. And again, we're talking specifically about fiscal sustainability and good governance. So just would like to put that on the table for Pastor Clark and Dr. Overstreet Vaughn and Mr. Ledbetter and Ms. Schumacher in particular.
I'm thinking that the priorities, have already kind of been identified by the people in the community, and so, it just becomes important for us to be able to have the financial resources to be able to sufficiently address those priority areas. And I'm in agreement with the focus areas that have been identified. So from that standpoint, but I think one of the other questions I have is looking at putting 36 million setting aside for debt avoidance is, something that will have an immediate impact. But ultimately, as we begin to look at we still have 23 million that we would need to secure bonds for. So I can see that ultimately getting higher. Do we have a plan in place, a strategic plan in place to be able to address it when we don't have, those ARPA funds? That's one of my concerns. What is our strategic position there?
Okay.
We happen to, have these ARPA funds available now, but what happens when we don't have those ARPA funds available and we have still the debt that we're
Other needs, sure.
So,
Okay,
so
thank
one of
you.
our pieces of guidance from the governing body right now is to average $9 million of general obligation debt on a year, or $27 million over a 3-year time period. That dollar amount falls into our long range outlook, to where we can actually maintain at that level of borrowing without seeing increases on the taxation side.
Okay.
So we are being very mindful of that.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're paying off more debt every year than we're adding based on that guidance.
Great. Thank you for that.
Have your projections built in a rate increase for the upcoming year and for the next couple of years, since that's a highly probable scenario?
On the utility side?
For any of the debt obligation, I mean, if you're building out the forecast, have you built in, as you're rolling the debt? It sounds like you've got a ladder on your debt. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel. But if you're taking out new debt because you're paying down debt, you're potentially increasing your borrowing rate. What's the borrowing rate of the debt that you're retiring versus the debt that you're about to issue?
Short term, Mr. Ledbetter, we're actually favorable. Long term is anybody's guess.
I think long term, the Federal Reserve's telling us, 1 to 1.5% in the next 12 months. So they're telegraphing as much as they can.
And we're in a very favorable position on that short term basis.
Does that go? Are you building that rate hikes all the way out to your 27 forecast? So I'm just trying to understand the data that you guys have provided. Does that include? Obviously you'll get a benefit in the short term. Agreed, but what happens in 5 to 10 years? To Dr. Overstreet's point, is if we're rolling this debt profile, what happens with a decreasing population, a potentially increasing labor cost, and a potentially increasing debt cost?
So I guess, so one thing I just want to, because a couple of folks have mentioned this, Steve, and I just want to kind of jump in. So yes, population decreasing can be a concern, right? It's not houses that pay for services generally. Houses need services. And Steve, correct me if this is different in Topeka. Houses need services. So again, it's looking at what kind of development do you have within your community to support some of those services as well. So and the kind of development that the community wants, which is what we've heard consistently over the workshops as well. So it's a both and is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to answer your question, Mr. Ledbetter. Basically through 2027, or I apologize, 2026. through 2026, we are not forecasting at this point in time the need for a rate increase on property taxes. Sales taxes, we're not advocating for an increase on our sales taxes. We are advocating for rate increases on water, stormwater, and wastewater. And those service our revenue bonds.
And I'll jump into there, Steve, that we did the initial calculations with the ARPA money to see where the biggest impact would be on households. And we found that the rate increases that we could decrease by putting that money into utilities was less than the impact that we would be able to have by lessening the debt on our GO borrowing to avoid a mill rate increase.
And, you know, obviously we can't forecast inflation. If we end up in a runaway inflation setup, that changes the scope of things. If inflation stays very low, then we're in great shape. So we're basically forecasting about a 3% inflationary expense growth on a yearly basis. Does that help?
It does. And just to make sure I understand, Stephen, I'm sorry, do you go by Steve or Stephen?
Either way.
Mr. Wade, I can call you Mr. Wade. Since you
Please
call me
don't.
Mr. Ledbetter. Well, please don't call me Mr. Ledbetter. It's throwing me off. I know I'm losing my hair pretty fast, but it still throws me off if someone calls me Mr. Ledbetter. But you indicated that labor was a primary contributor to the rate hike. So to some extent, Patty, that's partly why I centered my questions on labor. So I do recognize that, you know, there are more expenses associated to operating the city than just labor. But if I don't have, you guys broke down the revenue sources, but you didn't provide us maybe the expenditure profile. So I don't know where the expenditures are coming from, which departments, what within those departments. Is that labor? Is that equipment? Is that, you know, for that matter, is that IT? I don't know. But
yeah, so let me throw some quick numbers off the top of my head, and Josh and Adam can tell me I'm wrong. Basically, our labor costs for the city on our general fund are about 78%. Adam, Josh, am I remembering right?
That's pretty close, yes.
And then public safety, which we define as police, fire, and municipal courts, are about 72% of our overall expenses. That sound right, guys?
Yeah, it's about 3/4.
And Adam's just put in the chat just a link to the budget again for folks' quick reference too. Not expecting that you would read it during the meeting, but just so that you have it. So I did want to put on the table again, Steve. I don't know if anybody who hasn't spoken yet has anything in particular they'd like to make sure that the city is hearing from them in terms of what they'd like addressed in this particular priority. Just want to give folks again that opportunity.
Well, as far as particular priorities, and I know that this is from a financial standpoint, but, you know, I've been an advocate, a very strong advocate for, I know that community policing is focus on priority areas that has been addressed not only by the community, but the city has indicated that that's also appears to be a focus area for them as well. And my concern centers around the ability to have the community to provide input, or at least to be have open lines of communication as it relates to issues that come up from from police or law enforcement encounters. That's one priority. Another priority that I have that is really high on my list is, you know, I'm a strong believer that there's, and particularly in this government, there is a real need for diversity and equity inclusion. A strong need. We don't have an office that ensures that, and that is an area that we really kind of, to me, fall significantly short in. You know, the community engagement is one thing, but to ensure that there is the effectiveness of ensuring that ethnicity, as well as, you know, diversity and inclusion is important, and is necessary. So those would be two areas that I see. Also, I'm going to put this out there: potholes are that is definitely a high priority.
So too, I do want to make it clear too that we are taking note of these. So we're not just asking the questions, and so Bree's taking notes as well. So we'll have captured this. But
more pothole that makes me think that my tire is going to blow. I'm just going to have a fit.
Yeah. And I do specifically on the DEI issue of DEI that's come up several places. And as has, you know, in the public safety in terms of community policing, et cetera. And one priority area in staff, if you can help me remember, we have actually a goal, kind of a community of belonging, which really focuses on DEI issues across, the organization and into the community. So that's absolutely something that you'll see coming forward as well.
Great, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Any other suggestions or hopes or recommendations you would have for the governing body? Well, Steve, I don't know if you and staff have other things you'd like to present. You know, again, we're given the relatively few folks who joined us today, as Steve said, we kind of called an audible, but I would encourage you to come to that March 10th meeting, because and also finances touched everything too, right? Each of the other categories. So that's really an opportunity for you to really kind of dive deeper into some of these issues and help prioritize. Steve, I don't know what else you'd like to.
Patty, one thing I might throw out for any thoughts you have on follow-up. The budget office has an email address of budget@topeka.org.
Okay.
That goes to Josh and Adam and myself, and probably a cast of thousands. But we'll make sure that we get you answers on back, and so if you're thinking later, gee, I wish I had said this, don't hesitate to reach out.
Fantastic.
So the March 10th one, I think, will be fun. Dr. Overstreet, you'll hear some of the themes that you've raised. I think you'll hear those come up on March 10th. And as we get into the CIP budget is our capital plans. So that's the roads, that's equipment. That process is starting here very quick. If you see conversations like that in the paper and on television, and you have any want to know what that means, certainly reach out to us. We'll probably start the budget process itself on the operational side, I'm guessing about April. And so there'll be more opportunities for public input as we get into both. And I certainly would encourage everybody here to participate.
Okay, I definitely plan to do so. Thank you.
Good. Patty, other than that, I don't specifically have anything else. Josh, Adam, anything you can think that we're missing? So, and just thanks again to everybody here for taking time out of your day to participate.
Well, thanks for the invite, and I appreciate you all, your focus on this budget process. I know that sometimes it's like trying to balance a very difficult challenge sometimes, but you know, I appreciate the strategic focus that you all seem to have to it. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Patty, it's all yours.
Yeah, Steve, I don't have anything else. I mean, again, thank you for your time to the four or so folks who joined us from the general citizenry. We really appreciate it. We're sorry that it didn't kind of play out as we had hoped with lots of folks joining us.
Others must be trying to balance their personal financial.
There you go. Exactly right. But you know, as I said at the beginning, I think this is a little bit of a scary one for some folks. You know, they don't necessarily understand it or don't know what they'd have to contribute. But we appreciate your contributions, and we do hope that you'll join us on March 10th. So with that, I don't have anything else, Steve. I think we can.
Nope.
All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Can we just email those suggestions to the budget department?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay.
Yes,
I only
please.
have like 3 that I wrote down, but I'll email those to you.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.